Yeah, I tell you what, Eddie. Last year, if I'm correct, 5 out of the top 6 places were using plastic top weights.
Really?
I tell you what, the speed of the wax this year, you're seeing a lot more of the 16s, aren't you?
Yeah. Yeah,
Josh
uh,
switched to his 16s.
I know last year I played with 24s. This year I played with black 20s, which run like what I like to call 18s. Not quite as slow as 16s, not quite
Yeah.
as quick as 20s. Um, but last year the wax was a little slower, or a lot slower, and so those 24s ran a little faster. A lot of people this year are going to go ahead and use those 16s. So with that said, I went ahead and asked the two players here what weights they're going to be using. Uh, Jim Payne is going to be using 16s, and Mark Gray is going to be using 20s with a loaded metal top. So they should run pretty close to each other. I know Mark Gray won the flip. I kind of overheard he may be deferring, but I'm not sure if that's the case. It doesn't look like it. And I'll tell you what, if he knew this board well, he would not be deferring.
He would not be deferring the hammer.
He wants the hammer going this way. So we'll see some practice weights from these two guys. I know you're much more familiar. You've been around these two a lot more than I have throughout the years. I saw Jim play earlier, and I've seen both players play, but I think you'll be a little more in tune as far as what their strengths and weaknesses are. I think they're both pretty conservative players who like to hit weights and lag. Would you consider Mark a little more aggressive than Jim, or no?
I think we're going to see a pretty straight-up match unless somebody gets behind more than a lag.
Gotcha.
Jim Payne is a dominant left-hand player. He usually goes left, 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 and lags with his right hand. Mark's pretty ambidextrous. He likes coming up the rails. He usually chooses which rail the weight's closest to and goes with that hand.
I would say Mark does shoot a lot more firm than Jim. Would you agree?
Yes, he does.
He likes to really get into weights. Man, I was playing a cash game against Mark the other day, and there was a light deuce of mine and a 1 of his, and I'm looking at it saying he's probably going to lag. He looks up at his partner and says, I'm going to try to drive that deuce, and he drives it to a 3, and we kind of all look at each other like, good shot, Mark. And so he likes to get into weights, and a lot of that has to do with those metal tops. You know, those metal tops, it looks like he's playing with Swain metal tops, which have a little smoother top on them. And like we said, he also loads his weights, which what that means is he actually adds extra weight inside the weight caps. And so you will see Mark drive more weights than Jim throughout the course of this game, not only because Mark does throw harder than Jim, but because his weights are a little heavier. And if you're an average player, first-time listener, there are certain your weights can only weigh a certain amount. I think it's 355 grams, I believe, is the max on there. So you can't just load up your weights and make them as heavy as possible. There are parameters that you have to load yours to. And so Mark may have his, from what he says, loaded to the max. So they're probably pretty close right there to 350 grams.
I don't know if anybody's weights have ever weighed too much. I think that number needs to come down a little bit.
You know, I've never seen it. I think if the weight comes down, people will still stretch the limit. You know, you're always gonna push the limit. If they get heavier, people are gonna load them even more. You know, people are always gonna look for that advantage, regardless. But I know I talked a few games earlier about what weights benefit certain players, and plastic tops benefit certain players based on movement. I think I was commentating a game against or with David Williams Jr. against Craig White, and we talked about how much faster David Williams Jr.'s weights were compared to Craig White's, but it's just purely based on their styles. Junior wants a lot to left to right movement at the end of his weights. He wants that float out. He wants the movement. Craig is straight up. He just wants to hit weights and he wants to lag. So he doesn't care how much his weights move at the end of the board. So it's purely based on players. I would say a player like yourself that's extremely aggressive getting around weights doesn't want a heavy weight, doesn't want a weight that doesn't have a lot of action. You want action at the end of your weight.
Weight that's going to run out and continue to turn once you make the pass.
Right.
It's hard for someone with a metal top or a loaded top to get back to it.
Right.
Players, I think the reason Craig uses a slower weight is he's one of those players that doesn't like to back off a lag. He likes to put a full motion on a lag. Another player that comes to mind is Dave Kaiton. Dave Kaiton seems like he's always using whatever speed of weights he can put a full motion on.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'd prefer a slower weight as opposed to a faster weight. Even though my style is aggressive, whenever I lag, I want it to just sit there. I want to push for my destination. I don't want it to float out.
Yeah.
So let's get started here.